Good evening, everyone. Oh my goodness. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Have you ever asked yourself, what does integration actually mean? Or what's the difference between integration and assimilation? These questions have been turning around in my mind as I look at all what's happening across North America and some of the incidents that we've been faced with and have to reckon with. Is integration really a possibility? Our topic today is unexpected reasons why your mindset may make integration impossible. Why the way we think may make integration impossible. And the other question is that really or truly what we're up to? My name is Suzanne Hard, and welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. This conversation is for you if you are a leader who wants to make an impact in the world. This is for you if you want to embody inclusive leadership, which means you have the capacity to navigate and do business across cultural and racial lines and treat people as equitable partners. So as you join the conversation tonight, I see we have Tria already joining. As you join the conversation tonight, please let us know who you are. So put your name in the comment section, where you're joining us from, where you are anywhere around the world, who you are called to serve. So what is your business? Who do you serve? And also why you're here. What inspired you to join this conversation? I'm also going to ask you as you hop on to bless a life. And what that means is I know my guest is going to be sharing this conversation with his platform. So definitely share, because this is the thing. Conversations that are provocative create impact. And my goal as we go through this year is every Thursday to have impact in this diversity, race relations, cultural competency, and inclusive leadership conversation. And I'm hanging out in the inclusive leadership place. So that's what we're up to. If you're here and you're listening to the replay, welcome. Please put hashtag replay. And then I want you to do the same thing. I want you to share who you are, where you're joining us from, who you're called to serve, and what you do while you're living. I'm also going to ask you that when you love what you hear, definitely go ahead and bless a life, because knowledge is powerful when we, one, share it, when we do something with it, but it kind of gets in us when we get into conversation and communication around what we're learning. That's why I'm excited for what this conversation this evening. Also, as you join, get into the conversation. This is our networking opportunity. This is our opportunity to have great conversations and share our opinions, our thoughts, what is resonating with us. So comment, engage, ask questions. We will do our best to track what's going on in the comment section as we engage in a very, very powerful conversation. So let's get this live going. I see Anila has joined us. Welcome, Anila. So my name is Suzanne Hart. Welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. And every week we provide breakthrough conversations designed to challenge and possibly reset your thinking. My commitment is that we equip you to have the mindset to overcome fear, face challenges head on, and respond in a way that you wake up and live every day filled with passion and definitely on purpose. So I am so excited for our conversation tonight. Our conversation is unexpected reasons why your mindset may make integration not possible, impossible. Okay, so let me introduce my guest tonight. And I have to tell you, I met this gentleman about a year and a bit ago. He actually hosted me and we did an interview for his organization. And I was just so impressed with what they were up to in the world and just his breadth of knowledge. So the gentleman sitting beside me is a globally recognized human rights and religious freedoms advocate. Listen to that. He has nearly 2 decades of experience working in Washington, D.C. for the government, corporate, and the nonprofit sector. This gentleman is currently the co-founder and president of the United Macedonian Diaspora. What I know of him is he has a commitment to impact and broker change and to fight for equality of all people. All people. So please help me welcome Meadow Kolovsky. Hey.
Hello, Suzanne. Thank you so much for having me tonight. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I am so thrilled you are here. Having these, monthly inclusive leadership conversations, as I think through them, it's always who's going to be the best guest for this conversation? Who do I want to sit down with? And when I called you and you said yes, I was like, happy dance. Because, you want to have those conversations with people that you can go places that we don't regularly go. So first of all, I'm looking at the name on your screen here. What is a relationship broker?
Well, funny you asked this because I recently have coined the terminology. I mean, there is liaison, right, which is somebody that liaise between different organizations, governments, institutions, companies, whatnot. But I felt that what I do is actually I broker relationships, and people come to me from all over the world, a lot of them within the Macedonian community and other ethnic communities, and they're asking me for connections. When for example, a startup contacted me last week, I can't invest in their startup, but what I can do is help introduce them to potential other investors, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's how I see my job at the United Macedonian Diaspora is I am helping to broker relationships between many Macedonians around the world, but also people that want to get to know Macedonia and Macedonians. And so that's really where this terminology came from, and I love using it.
And that is actually so powerful because of your background, because to have someone that can broker a relationship and have a understanding of the impact of race, culture, ethnicity, all the diversity of someone, all our layers is huge because the introduction occurs differently, doesn't it?
Definitely. And what's funny is when you mentioned Anila, thanks to Anila, you and I met, right? And Anila is a very close friend of mine who comes from Albania, from Korça, which is from Tirana, but her and I have this mutual interest in Korça because she loves to vacation there, and my father's side of the family originated from this town in Albania. She's Albanian, I'm Macedonian, but here we are. Thanks to this beautiful friendship, I met another beautiful friend like you. So
yeah, and so grateful to Anila. And one of the things that's beautiful about this conversation, when I started it, and I was looking at what was unfolding in the United States, your country, and we're kissing cousins. I'm Canadian, and whatever happens in the U.S. kind of sneaks across the border. And so for me, everybody was talking about race relations, training and all this stuff, and I positioned it as an inclusive leadership conversation, probably because having friends and acquaintances like you and Anila, where, we talk about, you look like you're part of the North American tapestry, but when you get to know more, you understand it as a different culture, different nationality, different ethnicity, different religion, and all of that impacts in our identity and our ability to move and feel comfortable within a society.
Yes. Yes, and I will say I'm a huge fan of Canada. I probably visit Canada about 2 or 3 times a year, and Canada is a society that I think is a role model for others, especially on the multiculturalism front. And I have a great deal of respect. But obviously, Canada, the U.S., it took a long time to get to the level we are now, and we still have a way more work to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to jump into the conversation. So, what's inspired this conversation is we throw around this word called integration.
Mm-hmm.
And as I watched what was going on, I'm a big person on language. So I was like, well, what does integration mean, like, really? And when I looked it up, I was like, oh. So can you tell the audience what integration means for you?
Sure. Well, the classic definition is obviously the action or the processing and integrating into society. But for me, there's that economic, social, political component, right? And so how my parents came over from Macedonia as immigrants. There is a lot of struggles within the first years of them coming to this country and becoming more socially and economically stable within their group, their city, their local area, and making sure that one, they have a job,
Yeah.
two, making sure that they're able to raise their 2 kids and be able to integrate them into society. I'll tell you, I didn't speak English till I was in 4 or 5 because we spoke Macedonian at home, and
Yeah.
that was the only language I knew. And I actually went to English as a second language, ESL, for a good part of my elementary school, because I was, behind in that linguistic, stability. And then I think, adding this political component is once you're stable, then how do you integrate politically? And then become more active in the political aspect of society and in your local community to make and drive change.
So and and it is those layers. We come in when we immigrate, and when we came here, I spoke English, but I didn't sound like I spoke English to most Canadians, right? So people are like, "What language are you speaking?" I'm like, "I speak English." They're like, "No, you don't." They would say, "You speak some sing song something." It's not English, but it was for me. And so we do basic needs, then we do education work, and then, as you said, political, economic, all those different things. But I want to look at integration a little deeper because I want to get your opinion on it. So when I looked at integration, when I looked it up, it said that there must be a presumption of equality. In other words, the people coming to the society and the people in the society must be seen as equal and have equal respect of their differences, race, culture, ethnicity, religions, values, all these different things. And I see Arlene going, ha ha. And so when I looked at that, I thought, well, that's not integration we experience.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that's where this whole, dynamic of the multiculturalism comes in. I feel like multiculturalism is more that equal, whereas integration, when you integrate into society, you're not fully assimilating into society, but you're integrating based on certain criteria, right? And so I think it's still not equal because we're still different, right?
Yeah.
No matter what, you and I are still immigrants. Even though, I mean, you were I'm sorry, you said you came over from from
Trinidad,
Trinidad.
at 5 years old.
Yeah, when you were 5, and I was born in the U.S., but I still consider myself an immigrant because my parents came over literally a year before I was born, right? And so, them integrating, they didn't become Americans in the true sense of an American yet, because it takes a long time. And then obviously, we have this notion of melting pot.
Mm-hmm.
Where, in America, at least, we call it the melting pot, where, we throw all these people in this pot and they're all melted together and they're so intertwined, they mesh together. But then it creates a sort of a hodgepodge or different of what is an American. And then we incorporate different things. Like I was talking to a friend earlier and I'm like, what's American food? Hot dog. But that actually, comes from Germany and Poland.
Right.
Pizza, but that's actually Italian.
Italian.
And so all of these cultures have made American what it is today. And that's sort of like the prevailing identity that people want to associate with. Whereas the multiculturalism is that we're all different cultures. We are making this country what it is. And thanks to all of these cultures and foods, we are equal in making this country the country that it is, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's a sort of a long-winded answer to your question, but I definitely would not say we're equals through the process of integration.
It's so true. So when I looked it up, I was like, okay, well, equal's not something I experience at all. I'm just going to be frank. Equal is not what I experience.
I definitely didn't. I mean, give you a personal story how I grew up. I grew up in a town in New Jersey. Literally, I was the only white kid in a fully black school. And the reason why that was the case is because we lived in a street that was considered, okay, some of these people are white, but we're going to integrate them into this school. And I remember when we moved out of the neighborhood, my parents would tell, and I mean, I vaguely remember as a first grader, but my parents were like, the teacher was white, all the kids were black except me, and she's like, you're taking my only white kid away from me. And I considered myself as part of this school and this community. And then I moved to this other neighborhood, this other school system, and it's all white kids. And then I start getting made fun of because my name is Metodia, and they would say Metodija or Metodija because they couldn't pronounce it. Mm-hmm. And in order for me to assimilate, I changed my name to Matt. Because I was like, okay, stop, don't say, my name, just say Matt, because I felt embarrassed because I was being made fun of. Yeah. And then when a black kid would come to our school, or somebody of Latin origin, I'd immediately link up with them because we were the different ones.
So true, so true. So parallel story. So I grew up in a predominantly white town, an all-white town. So when my sister and I arrived at school, we were the only 2 black kids. I think we were one of 3 people of color in the school. And we clung to each other. Like, you see someone different and you're like, ooh, different. Let me go hang out over there. Because I didn't fit, and they let me know I didn't fit. And teased me about my not fitting. And so, as I was preparing for this, so again, going back to words, I looked up assimilation. Because I was like, well, if we're not doing integration, I like the multicultural piece because we're going to come back to that. Let's look at assimilation. And assimilation, to my was to be absorbed into another. Right? And I thought, well, that's more of what's going on, is that it's like you come to a country and they kind of don't say, but they do. Leave that behind, leave that culture behind, leave this behind, leave that behind, and we're just going to absorb you. And, I always think of, the effort to be the best and worst white person I possibly can, because it's not possible. But that, to me, like, you adopt it. So I had music, food, things I did at home. And as soon as I left my house, Chameleon Suzanne had music, food, and things she did to fit in. And I knew from the age of like 6 that the two should never meet, because the home stuff would get me beat up and made fun of. And the perfect accent, the do all the stuff that my friends did would help me assimilate. And I'm using the word intentionally because I couldn't bring all of Suzanne to that group because it wasn't accepted.
Sure.
Right? So, my part of the purpose of this conversation is what are we doing? And what do you think the nation, because you asked the question, what are we committed to?
Sure.
As countries, like, are countries committed to integration? Are they committed to assimilation? What are they committed to?
Sure. Well, obviously countries drive the agenda, right? And then it trickles down to society, business, sports, all sorts, right? And I'll give you an example. Today marks the 200th anniversary of Greek Independence Day. Wow. And over the last 100 years, Macedonians that lived in Greece as part of this new country, there were genocidal, ethnic cleansing, committed acts against this minority, and then institutional discrimination and assimilation. Unfortunately, these people cannot openly feel or express that they're Macedonian. So, whereas in America, assimilation, yes, I chose to have my name as Matt when I was, 7, 8, 9 years old, because I didn't want to get made fun of.
Yeah.
But on Sundays, we would go to our Macedonian Orthodox church, and nobody prevented us from being who we were in our center. Whereas in certain countries, for example, Greece, they don't allow that. They don't allow people to be separate from this overarching Greek identity, even though in Greece there's a lot of diversity, similar to how it is in many other countries.
Yeah.
And so there's this question of, yes, you're American, or yes, you're Canadian, but we allow hyphens. So I'm Macedonian American, right? You're a Caribbean Canadian. Other people, an Australian Italian. You know what I mean? So there's hyphens, and that's what's great about, the countries where we live in. Although our history has shown that, it's been difficult. When I there's a gentleman that's running there's a competition for favorite chef, and his name is Ryan Miller. And his competition, he's cooking Macedonian food because his grandmother was Macedonian. And immediately people are like, but is he Macedonian? His name is Ryan Miller. And that's similar, like I remember I have a colleague that was from Ghana, and I think there's misunderstandings all over. And so I would ask her, and I'm like, oh, wow, you're from Ghana. I know somebody, his name is Kwame. He's from Ghana. And I said, do you know Kwame? And she goes, Meadow, that's like asking me if I know Mike. Because it's such a common name, but I didn't know that, right? And so in the United States, obviously you could speak more on Canadian, but many people that immigrated here from all sorts of cultures they changed their names, or they were forced to change their names at Ellis Island. said,
Right.
"Oh, I can't pronounce your name. Your name is Mitre. I'm going to call you Mike."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what they put on the, the entry
Mhm.
certificate. And
Mhm.
that's the name you went, yet you're still Macedonian, let's say, or of a different heritage, but your name is different. That doesn't make you less of a Macedonian, but it shows the history of how assimilation has evolved. And now I think it's very different depending on where you live, right? Metropolitan cities. I'm fortunate living in Washington because when I came here, I felt like the cool kid because I was being made fun of for my name when I was a child. But then I progressed, and now I come to a community where they're like, "Oh wow, Macedonian food, Macedonian wine. We know Meadow. Why don't we all get together, learn more?" And it's a very different. So it just depends where you're at, and,
Mhm.
and I think assimilation can be a lot stronger in rural areas, perhaps some suburban areas, even maybe in cities, depending on what people do for a living, right? Um,
Well, I like the whole concept of multiculturalism, and we do, it's interesting, we do hyphenate things, and I think within the hyphen, there is an unspoken, um, the unsaid, that you arrived, but you're not from here. So there's,
mhm,
and that's what the hyphenation kind of means. And so I think what is really interesting is one of the reasons I wanted to unpack it is to really challenge people to begin to think about what it means and how committed are we to inviting difference into our world. Because
sure.
I people tell me I'm African Canadian, and I'm like, well, I'm Canadian. Yes, I have African descent. I have Caribbean descent. I'm part Carib. I grew up in French Quebec. Like it's a whole mixing.
Uh-huh.
But yet, when people meet me, they're like, "Where are you from?" And I used to, when I was young, go, "I'm Canadian," and they go, "No, no, 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 no. Where are you from?" And I go, "Oh, I'm Canadian." And so it always inferred that, yes, I'm here, but I'm not fully of here. And
Sure.
so one of the things I want to look at, what does that mean? Because we have people who have been born here, we have people who don't know any other place. So we think of all the Mexicans that have been deported and sent back to Mexico. We think of all these different things. So we have people that are born here, but because of where they originated, they're never fully a part of.
Mhm,
You,
mhm.
you have you have permanent visitor status. We'll let you stay really long, but you have permanent visitor status. And I want to look at what the impact of that is as we watch what has unfolded over 2020,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
What we watched unfolded just a week and a bit ago in Atlanta, where we see 8 Asian women gunned down brutally, and that's a whole other live. But
Yeah,
and so so you think that these are people who have built their lives here, working, part of the economy, contributing to society, all these things, and yet there's a targeting because something's originated somewhere else. There's a lot of that going on. So how do we get to this place where you actually belong?
yeah. I think you know first, the that attack in Atlanta. I mean, it's so disturbing. I mean, I have friends that are Asian, and then when you kind of look and speak to all of them, they're of different Asian backgrounds.
Mhm.
Not everybody is the same Asian, and people, I think, confused when they think Asian. They heard something on the news and they think Chinese. And then somebody comes out and says, coronavirus, and then we're going to stop, using, we're not going to drink Corona beer anymore because of coronavirus. And that's sort of the mindset, because you're clearly a mindset master. And I think it's, talking about the mindset of people is, well, the coronavirus, COVID-19, the better word to use, was from China. And then immediately people associate that with negativity. And then Chinese people are to blame. And then Asians are to blame. And we've had this history in the past with Japanese people, other ethnic communities, right? Throughout, we remember World War II, right? And right? I mean, we didn't live through World War II, but we know what happened as a result of World War II, right? And so I think this was on one of your shows recently, is like when you enter a room, you have to enter the room with open arms. Is like, I'm going to meet everybody, right? I want to get to know everybody. If you enter that room and you already have this kind of mindset that, oh, I'm entering a room of Asians, I don't like this, right? I'm not gonna talk to the Asians in the room. I'm just gonna talk to the people that are of my, background, and that's discriminatory. And you're only helping. You're complicit in all of these actions and whatever, And I don't want to get into the full-on details and the speculations and all that stuff. An attack against Asian Americans is an attack on all immigrants, is an attack on Macedonians, it's an attack on Africans, it's an attack on Black America, it's an attack on everybody, right? Anybody that is not like you, that doesn't mean we have to discriminate against them. And look, I think I was always educated, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it, right? Don't say anything. And there's certain topics that you don't discuss, right? And I am a part of this International Religious Freedom Roundtable. And what I love about this is that they have an open platform for all religions. I've come from a society where Macedonian Orthodox religion is not recognized by the other Orthodox world. We can't sit at the same table with other Orthodox religious leaders. So here's my outlet. I'm sitting on the table with all these other religious communities. And that to me is multiculturalism, right? And accepting of difference, right? Of opinion. I'm not going to like everything. I am not a part of your religion, clearly, but I'm going to fight for you to have that right. Yeah. And I want you to fight for me to have that right.
Absolutely. And why I wanted to really look at this in terms of, it's equality, and people absolve themselves, I think, of responsibility. And, you say it's government down. So we had a year of or more of the person in power in the US using inflammatory language to stoke an irresponsible language. This is the world, according to Suzanne, irresponsible language that identified race and culture and ethnicity as issues. And I think when you have someone of that power level, putting that in there, what it does is, for those who are not willing to be responsible, it gives them permission to kind of do the group effect. He said it, I can say it. He said it, I can do. And so why I really wanted to really bring this conversation forward is, unless I take personal responsibility for how I engage and treat another, no matter where they're from, they can't ever fully integrate. They can't ever fully even be multicultural. They can't ever fully be self-expressed, because I'm not checking my biases in order to be able to create the space for them to be self-expressed. And so, I believe that I have to do my work, and I think we all have to do our work so that I can sit at a table and see Meadow as my equal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And trust that he will see me as my equal. And I can sit and have a conversation with my friend Anila, who we have, our worlds are polar different, opposite in terms of heritage and background, but we have so much in common in terms of interests and likes and so on. So for me, it's each of us doing that work.
Yes, yes. And I think that, I think all of us have a duty to society, right? But it also, I think we touched on this, it's the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's the amplifiers, and
Yep.
that's the media, that's the influencers. And it really depends on how people, relay the message, to the broader public, and then how that's absorbed by the public.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has a different way of absorbing it. And then when you factor in social media, where everybody has a platform, and on Twitter and on Instagram and everything, and I'm never the one that will argue to stop free speech, but I believe that we need to be very mindful on how we use that free speech. Absolutely. And how not to, I would never want to discriminate against somebody else based on color, creed, sex, all that. That's not up to me, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that we have to be accepting and be willing to learn what challenges others have faced, right? And every community has different challenges and ways of dealing with those challenges, right? And so let's touch on, the immigrant community. Companies are now all hiring diversity and inclusion officers.
Right.
And because there is a trend, right? That one is a trend and another is what we have to do, right? We have to be willing to accept diversity and include people of different backgrounds into what we're doing. But sometimes it's very difficult because there's quotas. I never liked quotas, honestly. I was always, like, if you're qualified, you should have that job. It doesn't matter what background you are. But okay, there are certain quotas and there has to be this diversity inclusion quota. But then government stifles sometimes meeting that quota. And what I was saying about immigrants. So there's an H-1B visa in the United States, and that's a quota of high-skilled workers that come to the US, and they can apply for this visa. And if that quota is met, and usually that visa quota is met in the first day of the application going live, and so that's about 60,000 people, everybody else who's living in the United States that their company is willing to sponsor them, then they don't get that H-1B, and then they're forced to leave the country.
Wow.
Then there's another component to this is the company maybe is willing to, but doesn't have the resources because it's so expensive to apply for an H-1B visa, right? So actions and policies of the government have to coincide with how we want that to trickle down to society, right?
And it's interesting because when I started thinking this through, I come from a social services background, and I worked with very diverse groups, and what always struck me was that countries open their doors. Canada opens their doors and they say, come on in, but they say, oh, we're only going to let you in so far. And once you're in, we're going to put you through all these hoops, just like you're talking about, and we're going to have all these quotas and we're going to have all these numbers. So there's barrier to access.
Yep. Yeah, I have a friend, I mean, just facing those issues. I've had
Yeah.
friends facing those issues.
And what they're not paying attention to is as we have those barriers of access, it reinforces
Mm-hmm.
the stereotyping, the prejudice, the biases, because people can't be fully integrated, nor can they be fully functional, nor can they have all these barriers. And so it's like this barrier to access that leaves people struggling on the outside while they're trying to so-called integrate.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the situation where you have companies who are now doing the diversity, I got to meet my quota. But this is the challenge, and I just did a talk on this. This is the challenge. You may meet a quota,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody in that company is still coming to work for their biases, their judgments, their all the things that we are conditioned to have. And now you've got this place where it's almost like you've got a potential hot mess waiting to happen. And so, it's one thing to do, like to say, okay, we're going to become more diverse. It's a whole other thing to prepare ourselves
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
for the work ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what motivated this conversations is the keeping the conversation in the forefront of the minds so that I can take responsibility for my preparation.
Yes.
Someone else can take responsibility for their preparation. Companies can take responsibility for their preparation because companies are a microcosm, a kind of a microcosm of what's happening in broader society.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Well, before about this diversity inclusion, I think employees have to have feel a sense of belonging. And I think that's how it is with different groups in society. They have to feel a sense of belonging everywhere, right? And if you don't, that causes you to migrate. Mm-hmm. That causes you to look at other opportunities and look at other companies because you don't feel that you belong. Right?
Absolutely. So let's look at potential solutions because and I'm a mindset person. So number one solution for Suzanne is we got to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe that it is imperative that we all face the fact that we are conditioned to judge. We are conditioned with our biases. We are conditioned with a certain level of racism. It's institutionalized as part of the fabric of North America. It built the country.
Mm-hmm.
Let's face it, every group who has come to North America has faced exclusion, has faced marginalization, has faced oppression, has faced, we don't like your difference.
Yeah.
So part of the work is us just being real with that and going, okay, this is the starting place, right? This is the starting place. And then what?
Well, I think, the first thing we need to do is I think we need to have an open conversation and reflect on the problems of society. And it starts with education.
Okay.
Right? I believe strongly in how you are educated from the get-go. And it starts from the school and your teachers, but it also starts from home and your own family. Mm-hmm. And how accepting your own family is, right? And changing of the mind to accept that everybody is different, but we all form this one great society. Yeah. And we all have to help, so yes, there is individualism, and yes, there is collectivism, and how you look at yourself as an individual. And yes, everybody should prosper as an individual, but we also have a collective duty to society, right? And again, that starts from day one, and your upbringing, and then obviously the policies that governments enact that will make it conducive for you to be willing to accept and want to accept, and be accepting, period, right? Of difference, and not look at immediately from a negative perspective.
Yeah.
or judge people based on what you heard from others, or what your textbook said about some, group, right?
Yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey, and I love the fact that you talked about government. You talked about influencers. You talked about people in
Yeah.
media, people in positions of power. One of the next conversations that we're having, I think it's down the road, but is a whole question of you know when we are in public office, when we assume a public position, where do our personal beliefs end and our responsibility begin?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because we hear a lot of there's so much talk about the statement of the officer after the shooting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
like, well, whatever. And I'm like, no, you have a public responsibility right now. Your personal belief is like, to me, is relevant. And
Yeah, and I get this in my job all the time. Obviously, thankfully, I haven't had this kind of situation to deal with, but sometimes you have to bite your tongue and in terms of your personal opinions and what the collective, or the organization's policies, and you have to represent, and obviously, I think I've had instances where I didn't agree with certain policies of previous places that I've worked and all that stuff. And look, if you feel very, very strongly about it, you get out, right?
yeah,
But there are certain instances where, look, you might have a minor difference, but majority rules, unanimous support, whatnot.
yeah. And I think the thing that we're going to be faced with is I see it as a lack of responsibility for what we put into the public, based
Mm-hmm.
on freedom of expression, freedom of I get to say things, because I think we've gotten to the point where people are saying things out of their rights to say something, but
Mm-hmm.
not being held responsible for the repercussions of what they say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're in a place where we are going to be required to be responsible for our actions, our words, our deeds, and it's this, it's this slippery slope that we find ourselves in, where if I'm part of the majority, there's almost like this conditioning that, yeah, I can say that, and there's no consequence. And that's the stuff that makes multiculturalism, because I'm going to use that word because it's a much more effective word, multiculturalism in the true sense possible. And what I mean by that is I can celebrate my differences in the full sense.
Yes.
And some of it, yes, I will do within my own community. And then some of it, I should have a level of expression and a right to be and a right to feel safe.
Yes.
If we're really talking multiculturalism, if we're really talking true expression, because safety cannot equal you are able, like Meadow can walk down the street until you identify yourself. People could say, oh yeah, he's American, but you know in your heart that you're not. So assimilation or integration cannot be that it's okay as long as you don't let us know some stuff about you,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Or it's okay until something bad happens and then we get to target you.
Yeah.
Um, there has to be, we have to embrace it in its totality. That means we're going to come to the table in all our differences.
Of course. Of course.
All
Well,
our uniqueness.
Everyone has a different experience
Mhm.
wherever they may live, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And your experience is very different from my experience, and that's what makes us all. We learn from our experience. We learn to evolve, as a community, as people, based on those experience. We bring those experiences to the table, to the conversation. And I've always been a major advocate of a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And because my community has never had a seat at the table.
Yeah.
We're finally getting a seat at the table. But the other day, our Young Leaders program, Generation M, did a program on empowering women leaders in Macedonia. And they brought a very diverse, the moderator was a journalist from Australia. We had a startup professional. We had somebody that has like a podcast blog on women's political rights. And then another one in the cultural. And everybody talked about what women have faced in each of their industries.
Yeah.
And they delved into the topic of women representation, right? And that's another component of all of the society, right? Multiculturalism, everything, right? Is what role do women play in certain societies? That, the family bond, the business, community, the artistic community, political, we finally have the first time ever a woman vice president, an elected woman vice president of immigrant heritage and of Black heritage, African origins, whatnot, right? Indian heritage and all that. And that's what's fantastic about society, right? Is we can be many aspects of diversity. Who knows? We're all removed by if it's a sense of separation or separation or whatever. Who knows? We're all related somehow, one way or another. Or I was on a conference call this morning. Two of the people, I knew one of the other people, and then one of the other people knew the other person. And I'm like, wow, I've never been on a call where it's such a small world where we knew each other somehow, right? We met through, and that's what's great, I think, again, having that open mindset, and understanding your difference, the differences of people, of society, of economic. Everybody is very different. That's where I was taught never talk about finances in public, right? Or never have assumptions about somebody, because look, I could be wearing sweatpants and a sweater. I could be one person. Tomorrow I could be wearing a suit and I'm a totally different person.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And don't judge people by their color, by their clothes, just because you have this notion that it's not acceptable to dress that way or look that way or whatever.
Or that people who look that way do this, or I think it's all those sorts of things.
Yep.
This has been a great conversation, and you and I could stay on here and unpack and unpack and unpack, because we're talking race, culture, sexual orientation, we're talking gender, we're talking able, disabled, we're talking like all these things. And I think what we're saying is for someone to feel a sense of belonging. Let's use that word, because that's kind of like the
and not feel excluded.
And not feel excluded, and not feel marginalized, and not feel oppressed. And for them to choose how self-expressed they're going to be based on the race, culture, ethnicity, socioeconomics, all those different things that make up our diversity.
So what would you say in the solution aspect, or what are the steps that we should take?
I've kind of brought it down to three things. One is, as you said, education. And I think education in terms of just understanding what we're talking about. And a lot of it comes down to language. When we talk about prejudice, bias, stereotype, judgment, racism, sexism, all those things, power, privilege, institutional racism, so many things. I think it's just one, examining that language so people really actually know what's being said. Mm-hmm. I think the second part is really getting an understanding of the history of the country to which we all live, whether it be Canada or North America. Because when you start diving into it, you'll begin to realize that every group that's come here has experienced oppression, marginalization, and every group that's come here has also many times been invited because they have a resource, a talent, a skill that was required to building of the nation.
Yeah.
So I think it's understanding history and then understanding the history of marginalization and oppression. So that's the first part. I think it's the second part is really looking into what we're talking about, which is the cultural competency part, is around checking my judgment, checking how I've been conditioned to make those opinions of people, and really working with myself to have a situation where I can cross cultural lines and racial lines and ethnic lines and do so without judgment, do so open, as you said. And then I think the third part for me would be just the a whole level of emotional intelligence, where I begin to look at what are the emotions, like when I encounter difference, when I encounter a loss of a resource because someone who was different to me took it, qualified and got something that I think is rightfully mine. It's like when I experience these things that trigger my biases, how do I now manage that emotional space so that I come to a conversation where I can talk from a place of equity, I can talk from a place of conflict resolution, I can talk from a place of all these different things versus from the place I've been taught to talk from.
Sure.
And so I think it's the three of them, and then I'll let you talk about government and policy, because I think that's the other part that's not my wheelhouse, but I think that's the other part.
Yeah, I representative government is really important, right? And having when I hear, oh, the first Asian got elected to Congress, or over the years, or the first a black vice president, first woman, all of that to me is exciting news. And it's exciting to me because I was like, you know what? One day there will be a Macedonian in Congress, and I'll hear that the first Macedonian got to Congress, right? And what's great is that we, at least in America, in Canada, we've evolved sometimes through painful parts of our history, right, to get to that level. And where I said in the beginning, we still have a lot more to get to be the society that we need to be. But we're working very hard to get to that level. And government needs to allow and not stifle opportunities for people.
I love it.
Government, of all aspects of government. I'm talking about the executive, the legislative, the judicial, all of these aspects, right? And it starts from local. What do they say? Think globally, act locally. And that's always been, our motto at UMD is, we need to be strong in the local community, right? So the local community, the local governance needs to develop mechanisms. And this is why what you're doing is so important. And Anila, in terms of the diversity and in inclusion, and, how do local governments become more accepting or bringing more? Because I'll give you, let's say the Bosnian community. Right after the war in Yugoslavia and the Srebrenica genocide, many Bosnians fled and came to the United States. There are towns like Utica, New York, that were fully kind of resurrected. They were on the decline, and thanks to this immigrant community, they got it to the level where it was. And similar to Macedonians in Detroit, back over 100 years ago, or in like Steelton, Pennsylvania, or other places, right? And every immigrant community that comes. And so I think we all have to learn that by allowing more people of different backgrounds and creating opportunities for more backgrounds, I think then we can develop, we can grow, we can become prosperous as a society.
Well said. Well said. And I'm going to use your words. I think we all need to take our proverbial seat at the table, right? And it might be the dining room table. It might be the boardroom table. It might be my local church table. It might be whatever the table is. I think we all need to not wait for someone to create the change, but for all of us to take our seat at the table and ask ourselves, what can I do?
And speak up.
Yes.
And speak up, because one is to be at the table, but if you don't speak up, nobody's going to hear you, and there's not going to be any change or impact.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
It was a real pleasure, Suzanne. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to more opportunities with you.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to invite you back, because lots in there for everyone watching. Go ahead.
I said anytime. It would be my pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So we have been speaking with Meadow Kolovsky, and he has just dropped some beautiful information tonight. Meadow, if someone is looking and they're saying, I need to connect with this person, I need a resource, I need his relationship brokerage capacity, how do they find you?
Well, I'm on every single social media outlet: Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm not on Snapchat, and I'm not on some of those, TikTok or whatever, the new, I guess, social media outlets for some of our younger generation. But definitely anybody at Meadow Kolovsky or at Metodia Kolovsky is really my organization that I'm president of, United Macedonian Diaspora. So definitely, look us up, and happy to connect and talk about ways and opportunities and how to improve society.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you just for your generosity, because I know you got stuff going on. We were talking about what was next after you hung up with us. So I just want to say thank you for making time. And what's really interesting is usually like the comments are like this for some of them. So we're going to have to go back. But I see Anila has been lighting up the comment section. I see Yetta and Ken Decker from Ottawa are there. They stand for entrepreneurial couples to have harmony in their lives. So they have been out there. I see Arlene Moore was with us, and they have 3 businesses between her probably and her partner, and so she was joining the conversation. Wonderful to see. So you have been blessing lives. I will say you have been blessing lives, and I saw there's Cindy out there, and this is a conversation I know that's near and dear to Cindy's heart. So just thank you, because I think this is where it starts. It starts with people like you who have knowledge and have, the experience and well connected to come in and just give us some wisdom. So I just want to say, I feel truly blessed.
I feel truly blessed. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
All right. Thank you so much.
Table.
Yeah, that's right. At the virtual table. We'll be back at the virtual table very, very soon.
And everybody stays safe and healthy. And hopefully, soon enough, we'll be back to normal.
Yes, absolutely.
Whatever normal is moving forward.
And, it's evolving. It's evolving.
And so hopefully then we'll get to meet in person. We've been talking virtually, and hopefully you'll come to Washington. I'll come to Toronto and Canada.
For sure. Yes, I'm overdue for Washington, and I'm sure you're overdue for Canada, Toronto. So we'll definitely make that happen. Everyone, Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I have been sitting down with Meadow Kolovsky. We have been having a great conversation about inclusion, integration, multiculturalism, and what we can do to have an impact and actually claim our seat at the table. We will be back here next week. So please, continue to put your comments. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe to our channel. And this is what we're up to. So Unstoppable Mindset are for super achievers who want to reset their thinking so that they can navigate change and fear and challenge and truly have an impact in the world and live their life filled with passion and purpose. And so we're here every Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as we part, please know that you are brilliant. Please know that you are also very special. And ultimately, the world is waiting for your unique gift to be placed into the marketplace, into life, just somewhere be fully self-expressed. Take care, blessings, and I will talk to you next week.
Have a good night.
Take care.